All right, hello once again, Jeff Scott of Rankin Technical College, going through a series of user-created, self-created video presentations for the Rankin Technical College AWD Application and Web Development 1111.NET Framework with Web Databases class. I'm almost done with Chapter 7 of 18 from our textbook, ASP.NET MVC with Entity Framework and CSS by Naylor. I'm going to go through the last, 10 pages or so, but before I do, I just want to show you. It's kind of a window into my world. When I first started to do this, I thought, if you notice here, when we went over Chapter 6, I did 13 lessons, and that was about a 70-page long chapter. So I figured, when we get to Chapter 7, I'm going to get that many at least, and I'll probably have more like about 15 or 16. But this one I'm about to do, which is Lesson 8, will be the last one. So I can remove these. And again, the reason that it's shorter is this particular chapter, Chapter 7 on authentication and authorization, broke from the actual MVC baby store. It was a separate project to show you how you use this stuff. It was well written. All right. Now, I'm not going to have probably one tape for 8, 9, etc. Probably most of these will have several parts to them. But once we go back into Chapter 8, which we'll get into in just a few minutes, then we start to get into Chapter 8 is on creating the shopping basket, shopping cart, whatever you want to call it. The author calls it a basket. All right, so let's finish this up. Adding authorization for product and category administration. As the author says here, we are now going to use the admin role to manage the availability of the links and for admin features such as creating, deleting, and updating categories and products. Bottom line is what this is saying to me is that with the administrator, the buck stops here. In other words, if I want to create a new category, update an existing category, delete an existing category, create a new product, delete an existing product, or update an existing product, it has to go through the administrator. Now, I'm going to break away and try to keep this short, but tell you about something that happened to me years ago. I was a C programmer for AT&T Bell Laboratories. This must have been in about the mid-'80s, so about 30 years ago. And I was working on a telephony project. All right, AT&T, the phone company at the time, the big phone company at the time, still pretty big. But the point is, I decided that one of the databases that we were using needed to have a new field in one of the tables. Well, I knew I didn't have the ability to go and add a field, but I found, I went through the channels and I found out that I had to go over to one of our other locations. It was recommended that I do this in person and not through an email or a phone call or whatever. There was no texting at that time. All right, not really. Emails didn't exactly work the way they work now either. So the recommendation was I went over there to go over to one of our other buildings, other locations, and talk to the database administrator, plead my case, so to speak. And ideally, this person would say, okay, I understand. I'll talk with the other administrators and we'll get back to you. Well, I did what I wanted to do. I went over there and talked to the person. I got done, and it was a gentleman who'd been there many years. He listened to everything I had to say, and he went, no. I said, what does that mean? And he said, no, I'm not going to add this. Now, this was an administrator, so I was kind of dead in the water. And I mean, I was, for lack of better words, I was more surprised than anything else. And I was like, there's nothing I can do. No, you pleaded your case, and no. Well, I didn't think that was the case, so what I did was I went to my boss, who went to this person's boss, and we ended up having more than one meeting on it, and eventually the field was added. Now, I probably didn't make a friend of this database administrator, But, the idea, again, is the buck did stop there until it had to go up a little higher. All right. To add authorization or hide it, to do this for the categories file, we want to go to the views categories index file, and you can see what's in here. If they're an administrator, create a new. If they're an administrator and they've been authenticated, allow them to edit or delete. So there's your categories. You click on a certain category, all right, you've got your create, So this was for, as it says here, these are the links. When you log in, you've got to create new, and you've got the existing one. And as it says here, at the moment, a non-administrator can still manually enter these links. You have to realize that when you're working on a website, there are going to be people who are going to see if they can circumvent the way things work to do things they shouldn't be allowed to do. Now, the majority of these people don't have bad intentions. They're not trying to bring a bring a website down. 5-10% maybe are, or they're either trying to bring it down or get something for free or whatever. But a lot of people just, maybe they do it accidentally, not typically, but they just want to see what happens if they put in this or this. But again, notice, authorize, roles equal admin. This will prevent anybody who's not an administrator from accessing these URLs. All right? And it says now add the allow anonymous in so anybody can view the list of categories without logging in. Now that means they can view them, but they can't change them. Then we go through and we make similar changes that we just did for categories. We make similar changes for products. All right, if they're authenticated, all right, and they're an administrator, allow them to create, edit, and delete. The author says we've removed the details link since details are now accessed by clicking on the image. Also, for completeness, we need to update the details to add authorization to the edit link. All right, these are all things that you are going to have to think about, all right, as a developer. And if you haven't heard this from me or read it online or from somebody else or whatever, it is imperative as you're going through this process to constantly communicate with your users. So if I'm creating this for an administrator, that administrator, every time I make changes, I'm going to run this by the administrator, have them, work on it and say, you didn't do this. You didn't do this right. Could I also have this type of an idea? All right. So they also allow anonymously people to go in and look at certain things again, but not change them. So here I'm on the bottom of page 277. And as the author says right here, start the website without debugging, without logging in. Ensure you can access the product index page, okay, and that you can still click on the image. Now try to enter the following URLs. It says with each one of these, you're prompted to log in. So anonymously, you can do a minimal amount of things, all right? But if you want to go further than that, you want to do the CRUD kind of stuff, all right, you'll have to log in. It says if you then log in as an administrator, you'll be able to access those pages. If you need to perform more complex logic to validate a user, I recommend that you try to perform the logic in your controller classes. Then set a Boolean value in your model, your view model when possible. Because we're using pages generated by scaffolding, we've added the logic check we've added the logic to check the user's role to view the view file directly. So what the author is saying is you probably wouldn't want to do it this way. All right. I have mentioned this before, but it bears repeating, and that is the fact that it is not illegal, quote, illegal, unquote, to put, for example, logic in view files. You shouldn't do it, but you can do it. All right? So there's a lot of things you should not do, but you may choose to do anyway. All right? You shouldn't do it. Successful model view controller applications follow a certain sorry about that. If it sounded like I cut out a little prematurely, one of my bosses just came by and thought that somebody else was in the room here. So, okay. So I mean I think I've kind of told you, all right? Bottom line is there is a right way of doing things, and you should always strive to do it the right way. That's all. All right. Page 278, improving redirection after logging in or registering. It says you may have noticed during the chapter that when you log into the website, you're not always redirected to the page you were on. If you are trying to access a page that requires authentication, for example, to edit products, and you log in successfully, the redirection works okay. However, under other circumstances, such as viewing products, or you enter credentials incorrectly, you go back to the home page. All right. So to ensure that the URL that you are trying to access is stored even when you make an unsuccessful login, they want you to make that change right there. So as the author says on the bottom of page 278 and the top of page 279, if you try to access one of the pages that requires authorization, for example, to create a product, the return URL will be set so you go back there. Adding this new line of code, as it says on the bottom of the page here, ensures that this value is maintained when a user's login attempt fails. All right. Always redirecting to the previous page after login, which is the rest of page 279 here. By default, the redirect URL variable is set only if the user was redirected to the login page by ASP.NET Identity. It does not get populated if the user manually opens the login page. This means that if a user is viewing a particular page and chooses to log in, they're redirected to the home page rather than the page they were on prior to the login. All right, to fix this, modify the login link. As it says, it now has the return URL as the route. And you see that in here. Users will now be redirected to the page they were on prior to the login request. All right? Okay, turning up to 280. 280 and 281, 282 and 283, which will just about put this chapter to rest. Always redirecting to the previous page after registration. One remaining issue is that the registration process redirects the user to the home page once they have registered. To fix this, we again need a similar process of setting a return URL variable in the register link. They show this in here. And then setting it down here. Then we have to modify the post version so that it uses that return URL variable. Remember, this is a formal parameter here. It doesn't have to have the same name, but by making it the same name, it sure makes it much easier to deal with it in code. Finally, as they say on the bottom of page 282 and the top of page 283, we are going to add some code to deal with a scenario where a user has come from the login page and clicked the register link. We don't want to redirect the user to the login page after registering. We want to direct them to the page they were on prior to the login page. So we're using our old friend return URL again. All right. So these code changes enable users to register from any page in the website and then be redirected back to the page, to that particular page they were on once they've registered. Okay? When you click the Create button here, the user is registered and the website directs you to the Categories Index page rather than the home page, for example. So to summarize, and I'm on page 284 right now, this chapter introduced how to work and manage roles using ASP.NET Identity via the ASP.NET MVC. It also covered how to work with Bootstrap styles, how to create an admin controller, how to work with the admin role. The second half, as it says, covered working with users, including how to work with two database contexts, how to use code-first migrations on two databases in one project, how to apply authorization checks to display hyperlinks, how to use authorization attributes to restrict or allow access to controllers and methods, and finally, how to ensure that the website always directs users to the page they were on prior to attempting to log in or register. So, I'm going to copy this, and in just a few minutes, I'm going to go on into Chapter 8. Now, I always call it a shopping cart, but the author calls this creating a shopping basket. We're going to go back to our actual project again when we do this. Before we do, as I always do here, I'm going to come in, I'm going to grab everything here that I just had. So this will be Chapter 7 completed. We were introduced to or was it we were shown how to work with and manage roles using ASP.NET Identity with MVC. Next, work with Bootstrap styles to fix styling issues. I'll just leave it at that. Create an admin controller and views to access administrative pages. Apply authorization to restrict access to the admin role. Work with users, including how to work with two database contexts to allow you to store identity data in a separate database. Use code-first migration on two databases in one project. Apply authorization checks to display hyperlinks. Use authorization attributes to restrict or allow access to controllers and methods. Ensure that the website always redirects users to the page they were on prior to attempting to log in or register. So, as always, let's jump over to our project. Let's jump over to the, oh, you know what? We didn't set this thing up. Okay, so we didn't set this up in our project. So what I think I'm going to do is I'm just going to do a file, save all, and I'm going to do a file, close solution, and I'm going to do a file, recent projects, and we'll bring up the BS2. Now this is going to be a little weird because when I do this, it's not going to show anything as having changed. See that? So I think what I'm going to do is I'm just going to come in here and I'm going to make a very simple change. And I'm going to save this. All right. And let's, we'll put a comment in here. And I'm just going to put in here, comment created for Git repository reasons. Something like that. Save this. Now I want to be able to come into my Team Explorer. New head clone. Connect, manage connections. Why isn't it showing me anything in here? That in. Huh. Well, I wanted to be able to add this. I don't want to add a new one. Get out of there. I'm hoping that's the right one. Let's double check. So let's view our history. There we are. The chapter's all completed. All right, I'm going to have to clean this up a little bit. And again, you may be even thinking to yourself, okay, I understand what you're doing, etc. I don't understand why you're doing it right here. And I would tell you that the reason that I've decided to do this is, and I've said this in the past in other things that I've done, how can I expect students to do things when I am not willing to do those same things myself? All right? That's my rationale, good, bad, or indifferent. So, committed it. Let's take this and refresh. There's our Chapter 7 completed. I really should have said that was done in a separate project. It's okay. It'll be fine. So I now have gone through the first 7 chapters. Let me jump back to my Solution Explorer. And in just a moment, I'm going to go into Chapter 8. I'd like to, if at all possible, to get Chapters 8 and 9 done today. We'll see how it goes. But as it says, this chapter covers how to allow users to add products to their shopping basket. We're going to treat a shopping basket as a list of basket lines with a basket ID, a quantity, and the time the entry was added to the basket. I'm not going to go any further. I will come back and do that momentarily. Thanks.